Hey, hey, hey. Time for an out-of-this-world story from rSpace. If I had a dime for every time I heard, "He's just a friend." Today on rSpace, the only thing more complicated than astrophysics is the emotional terrain of these so-called friendships. My girlfriend flew to Europe to cheat on me, so I colluded with her affair partner to dump her and withdrew her master's funding. Well, since my relationship has now officially ended in the toilet, I guess I can share my story with all of you. I, 27 male, was in love with my girlfriend, 28 male, for months before we even started officially dating. After a few interactions, I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her, if I could. I had vowed to continue situationships till I was around 30, and was finally ready to settle down both financially and mentally, and that was because I had heard some pretty terrible stories from my friends regarding their experiences, so I didn't want to make the same mistakes. She changed my mind right away, without her even knowing it. We dated for about 2 years. I'm not really great with dates, and oh boy, that was a problem that came back to bite me in the butt on several occasions. Our relationship was mostly good. Nothing is perfect. You know, we tried our best to make sure it worked. At the time we met, she was studying towards a degree in psychology. She's incredibly smart, and that's part of what attracted me to her. She worked at a bar to pay her way through school, but she hated every second of that job. Besides that, though, she volunteered once as a mental health advocate for a mental health NGO. Her dream has always been to travel the world and help people in new places. I wasn't averse to that, but it wasn't my thing either. When I thought of my future family, we'd be settled in one spot and go on vacations, but we wouldn't be consistent globetrotters. When we met, she was a bartender at a bar that my friends and I frequented all the time. I knew when she got employed, and at the beginning, we hardly spoke. At some point, though, that changed, and we started having conversations where we would analyze couples that came into the bar and make fun of them. It got to a stage where I'd ditch my friends and stay back just to talk to her as she worked. I don't know when I fell in love, since there was no magic in the air kind of moment, or butterflies in my stomach. I just knew I wanted to talk to her every chance I got. At first, I didn't get the feeling that she was interested in me, although she wasn't reluctant to give me her number when I asked for it. She wasn't chatty or communicating with me outside the bar, but eventually she came around and we started talking more frequently on the phone, even about irrelevant things. At one point, she was having problems with her roommate, and it was just natural that she moved in with me as a roommate. There was no problem for me. I worked from home and it wouldn't be a bother. It was at a point soon after that when we came to terms with our feelings for each other. I asked her to be my girlfriend, and she said yes. Since we met, I have scaled up at my job quite significantly, with a handful of rapid-fire promotions and the associated pay increases. On the other hand, my girlfriend quit bartending once we started dating. She didn't give me a straight reason on why, so I'm not entirely sure, but I assume it was because I could support her and she no longer had to deal with a job she hated. I didn't hold it against her, though. I think she just wanted to seem entitled if she had to say it. When she graduated, though, I had to push her to work at a clinic, but she didn't stay there long. After that, she really started harping on about going for a master's, which I was okay with. Honestly, it sounded like a very good idea to me. However, she never applied for any graduate school or program. I spoke to her about this, but she felt reluctant because she couldn't pay for it herself, and she was hesitant about stacking up more debt. She was scared I'd end up paying for it, which she wouldn't like since I had been feeding her and housing her the whole time. Because my work is remote, at a point, she started pressuring me for us to relocate to a European country. Like I said, she's big on traveling the world, and she says traveling between EU countries is super easy once you get in. I tried to explain why that wasn't the best for me at this point. I was 27 and I wasn't about to start making such pivotal decisions that would likely cut deep into our financials. She pressured me about it a few more times, and when I didn't budge, she dropped that. Instead, we made a compromise that I'd help her out with her occasional travels while I stayed behind. It was the best compromise I could come up with to support one of her dreams. Her first trip was 8 months ago. She traveled on a week's trip with her friends to Spain, and they were going to rent a van and visit different landmarks and places. I was super happy for her since this was her dream. All I asked was to get the new phone number of a really good friend of hers named Evelyn. I know her really well, and she's pretty much the only friend I've been officially introduced to. That'd give me some peace of mind in case I couldn't reach my girl. I wasn't about to let her go out with people who I mostly didn't know and not have a backup plan for getting in touch. Initially, She was so against it, it was quite baffling. Her argument was that I was trying to police her life. It seemed weird to me because it was obvious I just wanted to make sure she was safe. Eventually, she shared some social media pages of the people she was going with, but she was adamant about not sharing Evelyn's number, and I let it go. You lose some, you win some. I should have pressed harder. She eventually left, and the first few days of her trip went well. We communicated as we should via calls and texts. However, towards the end of it, I could not reach her for 2 days. I was worried sick. It started when I realized she hadn't responded to a message for over 5 hours. I initially thought nothing of it, since she might have been busy with some activity and forgotten she had a worried man at home. It wasn't until the following day that I tried to reach her again, and there was still nothing that I became alarmed. I went to her friends' pages, and they weren't posting that much besides one that had posted a picture with the 4 of them and 2 random guys they said they met on the trip the previous day. Since the picture showed me she was alive and I didn't want to seem like I was stalking her, I didn't DM her friends. I just texted her again asking if she was safe. She didn't reply to that either until she was at the airport the following day. Her flight back was meant to take off by 4 p.m. and she finally replied to me at 3:23 p.m. That is when the girl I was dating remembered I was alive. She didn't even address the fact that she had disappeared for 2 whole days. I made a mental note that I'd confront her when she got back. When she came home, she was happy and talked about her trip and what she had done. When I asked her why she ghosted me for 2 days, she said it was because her friends had a no phone rule for those days when they had to be one with the world, or whatever that meant. That answer didn't satisfy me because she could have just told me before ghosting, and I had a bad feeling. But I just let it go since there was no proof of anything. However, since the trip, my girlfriend changed. It was like I was doing things that irritated her more frequently. She got pissed off at the slightest thing, and at the beginning, I chalked it up to her missing her friends and the freedom she had during her trip. But that didn't seem right, because my unemployed girl was on the phone 24/7 with those same friends, including the new ones she said she had made, and she didn't act like she was imprisoned. She could go out to all sorts of events, and sometimes I went along with her. Yes, I was busy a lot, trying to scale the ladder at work, and if I could get a good position before I was 30, maybe then I could settle down and marry her. We had talked about it extensively. Even with that, I made sure I stopped my work by 7 p.m. so I could give her the attention she deserved. As if her irritability wasn't enough, she started bringing up the moving to Europe thing again and how all you do is save. She even said that despite my promotion, I was still spending the same on her. I was livid but also confused because she had never acted so entitled before. I partially funded her trip to Spain, so why was all this coming up? I began to suspect that her friends had been filling her up with nonsense, so I decided to contact Evelyn and ask her what was happening. But I didn't have to wait too long because they had been planning and eventually took a trip again, this time to France. I paid for a lot less this time since we were hardly in a good place. She obviously wasn't happy about that. The week before she traveled, her irritability was a lot less. She was just generally in a better mood. Before she left for the trip though, I went and snuck through her contacts and got Evelyn's number in case she decided to ghost me again. So she went on the trip. We didn't really talk like we did on her previous trip. I guess there was still some sourness, but as long as she was communicating and not ghosting, I didn't think much about it. Got back from work one day while she was still on the trip, and since I was seriously starting to court the idea of proposing, looking back, considering the way she had been acting, that was incredibly foolish. But love does what love does. I figured there was no better time to talk to Evelyn about what she might or might not like if I was to make a surprise proposal. So I messaged Evelyn, introducing myself first, since we didn't have each other's numbers, and then asking her about how she was enjoying France. And that, my friend, is when the crap hit the fan. Because why was Evelyn asking me why I thought she was in France? I felt my heart accelerating like it was going to pump out of my chest. I had to calm down to get the story straight. So if my girlfriend didn't go on a trip to France with Evelyn as she told me she was, where was she and who was she with? That is exactly what I asked Evelyn. And at that point, she knew she had messed up because she started making excuses and talking about how she was supposed to go but due to an emergency had to stay back. But if that was the case, she should have said that in the first place. Her first response was like she wasn't even aware there was a trip to France. It didn't take up to 30 minutes before my phone buzzed with messages from my girlfriend. Checked it out, and she said she was doing good in France. Everything was fine, and the girl said hi. She then added that it was sad Evelyn wasn't in France with her. Obvious damage control. Evelyn must have snitched by then. You know how I said she was smart earlier on? Well, reflecting on this, I see she really isn't. I'm not a fool. She didn't go anywhere with any girls. She was cheating, and she was cheating with my money. But I had to play the fool and pretend that I knew nothing, because I knew I was going to have to hit back at her, and I needed to get more information to formulate a plan. She came back, and I could see how uncomfortable she was. But while she thought she was a good liar, I'm better. I showered her with attention and love and acted like I believed everything she said. That same day, while she was sleeping, using my laptop, I quickly linked her WhatsApp to WhatsApp Web. I would see some of her chat history, and I could monitor chats as they came without rousing suspicion. When that was completed, I went to the sofa and took my time going through her messages. The first thing I found out was that she had a fight with Evelyn about her slip. I don't know what she wanted the poor girl to have done. I didn't see much, at least until I entered the archived chat. What I found there was enough to fuel my anger to the point of wanting to wake her up right then, but I needed to stay calm. I scrolled through her archived chats and discovered a conversation with someone named Leo. From their exchanges, it became clear that this was the guy she had been cheating with. She had met him on the first European trip, towards the end, on the 2 days that she ghosted. Also, she and the guy planned to go on another trip because they were birds of the same feather. They loved traveling, and he already fit what she wanted, someone who lived in Europe. The conversations were filled with flirtations, pretty graphic descriptions of things they wanted to do, and apparently had already done, and they were discussing plans for future trips, too. My blood was boiling, but I knew I had to keep it cool if I was going to pull off what I had in mind. That's when I started setting up my revenge. I wasn't about to let her get off as easy as a simple breakup. Remember that master's she wanted to do? The first step was to get my money back. A few months ago, I had paid for her master's degree as a surprise for her 29th birthday, which was some weeks ago. She knew I had been applying on her behalf with access to her email and everything, and she knew she had been accepted to one of her top choices, but I didn't let her know that I had paid until that birthday. When she found out, she was so happy. She went straight into the necessary registration process. It had been clear she wasn't going to waste the opportunity. However, now since I was trying to ruin her, that was all about to go down the drain. I accessed her email and requested and started the necessary processes to withdraw her admission and request a refund for the full tuition amount, citing financial difficulties due to health issues. I eventually got a response that the refund would take a few weeks to process, but I made sure the confirmation email of the approval of the refund was deleted from her inbox the moment I got it. She wouldn't know until it was too late. Probably not until some point when she was well into her first semester. That was my hope. The second part of my revenge opened up to me on its own. She told me she had gotten a part-time job. Her uncle had pulled some strings to get her a well-paying job at a telemedicine company. She was excited about it. I knew then and there that I had to convince her to turn it down, which I did later that evening. I told her that I would support her financially while she focused on her master's degree, since a job would limit her from studying. I also told her a job and schooling would prevent her from being able to travel at all, and I knew she wouldn't like to be apart from Leo. She reluctantly agreed. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to ensure she felt the sting of her betrayal, not only from me, but from her affair partner as well. So, I got Leo's contact from the linked WhatsApp on my laptop. I found out via messages that Leo was unaware she was in a relationship. She had lied to him when he asked, claiming to be single. I decided to take my time and befriend Leo. It took about 4 to 6 days to get him to warm up to me, since I had to make up a random excuse as to why I was messaging him. When we got comfortable, I told him about my relationship with her, how long we'd been together, and how she had been two-timing us both. He was shocked. I think he felt more pity for me than I felt for myself. He apologized over and over, and I had to convince him it wasn't his fault overtly. My girlfriend was the one who needed to be punished, and I give him so much credit because he spearheaded this part of the revenge. He agreed to help me teach her a lesson. We plotted together. Leo invited her on an impromptu trip that very weekend. She likely thought he was about to ask her to be his girlfriend. While reading the chat between them, you could see how happy she was and how she believed all the pictures he painted of candlelit dinners they would be having at a very expensive hotel and the places they would be going to. She came to me to help fund it, lying that a friend of hers was about to get married and she completely forgot. She said she had to absolutely be there and it was going to be for just a weekend. I didn't object to anything she said, but I made her fund it herself since I had been paying for her degree and supporting her financially. Leo, on his end, also refused to cover the trip, citing the responsibilities he would be carrying out on the said trip. She spent her meager savings, believing she had me wrapped around her finger and I'd eventually top her up if she seemed desperate enough. The day of the trip arrived and everything went according to plan. I drove her to the airport myself and watched her plane take off. Once she met up with Leo, we didn't waste any time whatsoever. She texted she had gotten to Spain, and an hour later, I got a call from Leo. As soon as I picked up, I heard her voice and immediately started laughing. I let her know it was me, and there was immediate silence on the other end. I imagined that she must have looked towards Leo, all the betrayal and hurt. I let her know that her belongings would be waiting for her outside after she got back, and then I hung up. I don't know what happened afterward because I blocked her on all platforms. Leo also told me that he ended things with her right there at the airport. He had made all her accommodations plans, so I don't know how she sorted herself out towards getting back, but by Sunday evening, she was at my apartment and she was a mess. She started by weeping and asking me why I had done her dirty like that. She claimed Leo was just a friend, which really pissed me off. Eventually, her tears disappeared and we had a heated argument when I showed her all the evidence I had gathered, the messages, the pictures, even from the first trip on her friend's Instagram. I didn't let her say anything further. I just kicked her out of my apartment. She didn't even resist after I barked at her to leave. We ended up talking about 4 weeks after that when she called me to start cursing me out. I didn't even get a chance to say anything for the first 2 minutes, and that's when I realized she had found out about the fact that she no longer had a master's to do. I also reminded her that she didn't have the cushy job her uncle had prepared her either, and I made sure she knew that I had been playing chess ever since that point. She actually drove down to my house and made a huge scene when I refused to open the door for her. She threw a beer bottle at my door, or at least tried to, and missed. She left key marks all over it too. At a point, she started weeping. It sounded like she was howling, really. She eventually left when I refused to acknowledge her presence. She basically crashed out, as they say these days. I regularly get messages from her. They're a mix between cursing me out and asking for forgiveness, and I block each new number she reaches out with. She started resorting to using friends' numbers too, but I blocked them all. She'll get over it eventually. But yeah, that's it for me. I'm going to be so apprehensive when it comes to women in the future, but what can I say? That's life, I guess. Oh man, where do I start with this one? You really nailed it, OP. From cleverly getting her master's degree refunded to making sure she faced the consequences of her actions, you definitely put in the effort to make sure she knew exactly how you felt. As for your ex, her excuses for ghosting, being one with the world, really? Come on. If she put half as much effort into the relationship as she did into crafting the cosmic mumbo jumbo, things might have turned out differently. But hey, you've shown that you're not just moving on, you're doing it with style. Here's to leaving the world of half-baked apologies behind. Do you have a similar story? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.